Welcome back for Twilight Hues Part 4, Tags, Tucks, and Final Overall Touches. Here's where we're going to show you this final pieces, parts, and really pull everything together on Twilight Hues. So let's get started, and thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, kicking off Part 4 with 2 tags right out of the gate here. This paper I knew I wanted to use for sure on something that it was really gonna showcase its coolness. And this actually started out as needing a tag for that piece right there, which I don't know if some of you will have noticed that is from some of the pictures that we had done, and also a previous video where we showed the other tag that has some similar elements with the slow stitching. I'll put a link to that above here, and if you want to click over to see it, it's a pretty cool video as well. But to get back to these 2 particular tags, started out thinking that it was going to be for the stamp, but then realized this was some really cool paper and we didn't want to cover it up with any of the other elements and just kind of wanted it to stand alone. And so the height of the paper was a bit short, and so I needed to use one of the other papers to just finish off the top, which worked out really great. One of the other cool things is it has the Calero watercolors on it. We have 2 videos for that. One for gilding like torn edges, and one for just adding that sparkle shine with some spray type technique. I'll put those links above as well. So you can see I'm trying to figure out, I'm just like, oh, that's just not really working. I knew it worked with the purple, but I needed something a bit more solid to go with that particular piece. And as I said, this particular tag needed to kind of shine on its own. But at least this way you can see 2 tags coming together all at once, which I'm sure many of you projects work out the same way. You have some initial ideas and then kind of have to change it up as you go. Getting out the embossing folders for this second tag, for this one, there were two kind of frustrations with this particular little piece. Is that A, it was too long for the embossing folder, and it was probably going to be too long for the end product, the end tag. So it was okay to just rip it, and we came up with a pretty cool idea about attaching it back together. We know that we knew that we wanted to use some more of that slow stitching, and so you'll see in a little bit how we utilize some of that. And now just kind of finishing up with that same paper, bringing it from one side to the other. Calling this one pretty much done. We have to fix that one side where it was a little bit short, but plenty of paper still to work with there. This was also one of, or 2 of, the papers that were Mod Podge prior to, that's why it's shiny, it pops off the color. It has worked out to be something like really cool, and I'll keep saying it again and again that that's probably how we're going to be utilizing most of our printable papers. It's also a great way to limit your kind of messing up with using the Mod Podge. Sometimes it ends up getting onto other things that you didn't necessarily want it to get onto. So by pre-Mod Podging the papers, there's kind of two bonuses there. You get what it's going to look like in the end, which is pretty cool, and then it's already sealed and you don't have to get it on anything else. Some other bonuses to it, and I've mentioned this as well, is that when you're doing these deckled edges, it stops a lot of the markers or even watercolors from bleeding through too far. It still has some, but it does protect that edge a little bit better and keeps the color right there where you want it. Using a multi-marker process here, much like I did on many of the other pieces and parts prior to this, with the blendables, a bit of the alcohol ink marker, and you can even see a bit of Posca there. I always, you know, I'm always doing the edges of the tags and things with the Posca markers. That's one of my go-to techniques there. And that is pretty much it on that particular. Now I'm like, okay, I liked the shape and I wanted again to repeat it. So used that as a template. This is really nifty paper we got from one of the local paper companies. It actually has a velvety touch feel to it, and it's really thick. You can't beat that purple. My poor wounded crocodile. One of these days I will replace that one. So one of the reasons that I'm doing two pieces here is I'm going to run one of them through the embosser, but I didn't want the texture to be on both sides. And then you see I kind of run into the same problem of it's a little short, but I'll show you how I remedy that here in just a second. Run it through a second time. Trying to match it up as best as I could, plus I knew I was going to do some other little effects to it or some other techniques with some torn papers, and that covered up that bit of seam where it meets right there, kind of in the middle. At one point I was thinking about making it into a pocket. I so tried to use that very long Twilight poem. It never really panned out. So I kept it simple. There is actually a quote on this one. I tucked it back behind the one little piece that you see off to the right there. Now I finally just figured, all right, it's going together. This is just a two-piece thing. And then the other elements will go then on top of that. And as I stated before, I knew this was going to be way too long, which turned out great. Used that little piece that then became the one little strip across the back to cover up that seam. Coming back in also with markers and to finish up those edges, much like I do technique with most torn edges. But it blended so well and it picked up the texture. A little bit hard to see here, but what's really cool about using that paper, and again, that's the paper that we use all the time, the Paycon Craft white paper that comes on the big roll, is it has a lot of fiber to it, but it's pretty thin and malleable. So when you're using it in this, you get the texture that comes back through. Just coming in with the blendables. Because I didn't want that stark white edge right there. That paper is also really great. You saw that I was kind of rubbing off some things. It's pretty nice. It has a cool finish to it. And now the other pieces and parts had been put together. P came in, slow stitched all of that. I don't think that we needed to show that on camera, plus she doesn't always record everything. And, you know, that's just kind of how some of these things work. It was slow stitched and glued onto that one long strip. And that pretty much covers that particular tag. Now, we're coming around, just like I said in the very beginning, this is all about some of the finishing touches. So here I'm creating more repetition. This was that paper that was the one big sheet that was texture paper, and P came along, added a bit more colors and things to it just to match up more so to the Twilight journal and other papers. I knew I had to use that. It was just too cool of a swirl not to use. And figuring out now where all of these little tags and things that had come along sort of afterwards. That little tag right there, there is a video. I'll put that link right up in the corner. Click that card if you want to see how that is the one that we showed exactly like all the slow stitching, much like the stamp tag. And I think it was in part 3, I talked about coming back in and adding that magnet because there was another element that needed to go on there, which was this cool little pocket slow stitch tag. Always getting those little magnets to line up. Sometimes easier than others. I also wanted to make sure that it was gonna hit right along the torn edge in a way that it wasn't going to be out of place. I got lucky. That was tricky. Coming in with my tool there, just making sure that the edges around the magnet were glued down. And now that piece is in place. Coming back into the cool little swirl, which ends up being another little flip panel along with a pocket inside of it. And you can see P and I just talking about, a lot of times this is how we move through a project, making sure that, okay, well, this all makes sense, this is good, and then, okay, what's the next finishing touch? What other elements like that, again, bringing in more of that particular paper to finish that out. Creating a little pocket for that super cool tag. Very in love with that tag. Nice little trick there is I didn't want to rip it or tear it or anything like that, so just glue down that one edge, do a little kind of tuck pleat, and then glue it in. If you come in quickly enough with, you could see the glue was setting there, but just use the tag to make sure that I've got my room there. You don't want to necessarily leave it there, but using up all my little tiny bits and scraps, bringing in some of the color too to repeat, because I felt like some of that yellow was a bit stark there. So one of the last vellum tags, and I just thought with this one, and since the little swirl pocket flip open was different, that this tag was gonna be a bit different too. So the vellum quote is the tag. I just tore the edges around using, and then that's actually the piece from around the swirl, and just repositioning it on the back side to create a little pocket for this quote. And another little tip or trick to keep in mind, I have now figured out that the Tim Holtz Distress Glaze will seal. You can use it on the vellum printed paper. I was a bit worried because the Mod Podge reactivates the ink and will smear it, plus it bubbles and does all kinds of crazy things. It's very hard to get the same results, whereas using the Distress Glaze on that worked perfectly, and I was able to keep my vellum little flips and quotes perfect, but yet they were sealed. Creating a little belly band out of that same paper. So I think just about every panel has a piece or a part from that catch paper with the texture and then the recoloring that P added to it. So now you can see things are coming along pretty nicely here. Have the little belly band done for the stamp slow stitch tag. And you can see the little bit of slow stitch there at the bottom of the tag and all the things and all those parts just really came together very nicely. So now it's time to pull out one more swatch for another tag. You can see it there. A little piece of artwork that P pulled together. We knew it was gonna work well, and just used again some of the catch paper, and that is like some raw catch paper right there in the background. And that was really all I had recorded of that. I do apologize, but I thought it was better to show the little bit that I had versus not showing any of it. And now you can see the attachment in the background there, and we're gonna go through that whole process here in just a second, but thought that would be nice to go ahead and just kind of drop in a moment of how everything has really come together. All of those different tags, and there's that last one with the back part, and those are just torn off pieces, by the way, of the last bit of the rest of that textured sample piece. So that thing really went far. So now we're gonna we're gonna get into the attachment. And I'm going to speed through this very, very, very quickly, because it's kind of, once you have the idea of how it was done, then it was just, you know, tear, repeat, tear, glue, tear. I wasn't sure that this was gonna actually work, but it did. That art glitter glue is the bomb. Here's some more of that catch paper left over, and I just thought it was, might as well bringing what we did on the inside out onto the outside, and did that in those longer runs across that whole section there. And you can see it's really funny, the one flower embossed paper panel, it has actually, the texture has shown through onto the backside, and the a little bit of magnet looks like the center of the flower. Happy accidents for sure, not planned at all. I think one of the reasons that the fabric did hold as well as it is that it is so porous. It's that chiffon. It came with that orange piece of paper, or orange fabric, came with a bouquet of flowers from a long, long time ago. I kept it in this pile of other fabric pieces, and really has made quite the debut here, and has been a huge part of Twilight Hues. So not only is it this connection piece, but it is also on two, actually three, of the inner pieces, because it used it as a little tag pocket. Well, really more like a belly band. It wasn't a pocket. I don't think I got that on video. I am trying to figure out the pieces and parts of these videos to be able to show to you guys, so you enjoy them and get the techniques down, along with seeing how much really goes into these. Not only just with the amount of different products and all of that, but all of the different artwork, and whether it's printables, and then also regular just catch paper, and catch paper turning into artwork, and then that artwork turning into printable papers. And speaking of printables, that's again another one of the Twilight Hues papers. Now this set that I did print out for Twilight Hues for the journal versus the printed set are smaller. I didn't, and I do that a lot with any printables, even ones that we have purchased or done for design team purposes. I very, very rarely print out the full actual size. Number one, for paper saving reasons, and number 2, our journals are usually something like this with the smaller sizes. I knew on this side using the blendable markers like full force rather than using the blender on them was the way to go, because this side is so dark that they needed to blend in well versus having that white stark line. And it was kind of a question of wondering how far down did I need to bring, or how far up it needed to go. Oh, there's the little tag, and I decided to go ahead, since I had that quote left over, popping that in there really quickly. I believe I used just about every piece of that textured catch paper turned a big part of Twilight. And I was a little sad because Mom had used, or P had used the bird stencil, and I wanted to keep it, but it was a stencil, so it's not like we couldn't do it again. It did make me feel a little sad tearing it up, but I needed it for this. And I liked that idea that it flowed so nicely from the orangey yellow reds down into the deeper magenta, purple, fuchsia. Much like, especially here in Texas, we have these sunsets that are just amazing like that. And I'm sure everybody, you know, wherever you are, has those moments. But it seems that right off our back patio, we get a lot of these, especially this time of year in fall. And that was really pretty much it with Twilight Hues. Now what you're going to see here is P cutting up the rest of the bouquet fabric into strips, so that way she can crochet, and that term is used very loosely because I think she does kind of a crazy freestyle crocheting, but just crochets those pieces together to create that band to hold Twilight Hues together. And many of our journals, this is kind of becoming one of our signature things that we do, is these crocheted closures with a button. You don't see it in this. I don't think that we actually got that part recorded, but the button that goes onto this crocheted piece, we ended up using alcohol inks to dye it and make it match the purples. So another little tip or trick there. It's pretty fantastic. Works well, especially on plastic buttons. So if you have some cheaper white buttons and want to turn them a particular color, alcohol inks work well. And then I think she just used some spray varnish to seal it in. And that's a wrap. There you go. That is Twilight Hues. An art journal, mixed media, pockets, tucks, tags, and 7 flips, along with some printed paper and original art. I want to thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you again. So like this video, add some comments below, subscribe if you haven't already, and when you do subscribe, click the bell.